Welcome back to the channel of Truth, Trust, and Transparency. And guys, we're getting closer every single day. 367 subscribers to go until I hit my 2,500 subscriber goal by the end of the year. I'm posting every single day. If you're finding value, please hit sub. Now, Lisa's messaged me today. She didn't message me today, sorry. She messaged me a couple of weeks back, but I'm going through and trying to get to all your messages so that I can put together a bit of a video. On today's video, for Lisa and anyone out there watching, as I said, and as I will always say, I'm not a financial advisor, shouldn't be financial advice, educational purposes only. Your accountant, your mortgage broker are going to be the best person in your team to chat to regarding these sorts of plays. But you've asked for my opinion. You've asked, Dave, what would you do? I'm happy to show you what would I do. It's not something that you need to do. Potentially consider it, talk to your partner, go from there. But Lisa's question. Hi, Davey. Loving your content and have been listening to your podcast for a while. It's so refreshing to have a no bullshit approach from someone who is not trying to sell you something and definitely wants to pass on the wealth of knowledge you have in the property space. You're a legend. I do sell a course though. I'm a bit of a course bro. That aside, I'm looking to purchase our next investment property. We currently have two plus another in my self-managed super fund, which recently settled. We also have the PPOR. Loan details as follow. 713K against the portfolio PPOR of $2.6 million. IP1, 3-bedroom townhouse on the Gold Coast, value 800, loan 300, rent 575. IP2, a unit, value 650, loan 450, renting 510 a week. Self-managed super fund, house, value 450, just bought, loan 350, rent 380. 80K cash in the bank. Would like to keep 30K up my sleeve, maybe pay 50 off our PPOR and then redraw into a split loan for tax reasons. We currently make $300,000 a year. My wife is 55 and works in a government position and wants to retire in 10 years and will earn 150 grand a year with CPI increase for the rest of her life based on her super scheme, which is great. I know a couple of people on this scheme and it's ridiculous that the government put this in place. Congratulations to your wife, because that is honestly awesome. I'm only 41 and work for myself as a chiro. I love my job, but want to not have to work. I also think I have FOMO when she retires in 10 years' time. My plan would be to retire fully in 15 years if possible, or maybe work 2 days a week at that stage if I feel it. We're currently paying an extra $600 a week to clear the PPR debt in 10 years so the wife can retire. I want to purchase another 1 to 2 properties, but she's not so keen on acquiring any more debt. I'd love to know your thoughts on our situation. Should we sell the Gold Coast property, pay down the PPR debt, which is non-tax deductible, then buy 2 more properties, which we can sit on for the next 10 years, or keep and just use the large amount of equity to go again? I know you say to keep existing assets if you can. I want to be able to show her that buying again is the way to clear our debt quicker at the end of the next 10 years, as most property cycles will double in that time. I wish I had the courage to develop, but with no experience and her low risk appetite, I think sticky to residential or possibly buying a small block of units regional may be an option. Would also like to purchase again inside my self-managed super fund, but only 20K left after last purchase, so I might have to wait a bit. Appreciate your time. Let me know what you would do. Now, guys, if you ever send me a question, you got to be quick on the response, because I sent Lisa a few questions this morning. She didn't get back to me, but I thought I would go through this anyway. Now, let's start off with the current portfolio. Again, not financial advice, but this is my thinking. This is what I see out loud. You have your PPOR, you have a townhouse and a unit in your property portfolio. The issue is going to be when you get to retirement phase in 10, 15 years time, or when you want to retire, townhouses and units part of strata complexes. There is nothing to say that in that year's time, there are special levies, all these a lot of capital works for these depreciating assets that you'll need to put money away for. That will suck out of your cash flow. Now, the reason that I personally don't like it is a few things. Again, strata, you have those complexities, you have larger depreciating assets, townhouse complexes, unit complexes. I don't have anything else to pull out or any other levers to pull in terms of increasing rent. Now, if we're buying a house and we're strategic about that, we can come and add the granny flat. As you guys know, definitely there's room for it and there's a time for it in the portfolio. But here we can't do any of that. So we're kind of stuck with potentially having 110 grand from those two paid off assets. One thing I did notice is that the total debt across the portfolio, now we're not including the superannuation, but across 1, 2, 3 is 1.463 million. Total income with 300K plus the rental income of these two. Now, again, not a mortgage broker, so you're going to have to talk to a mortgage broker because I haven't done any shaving on the rent of these two properties. I've just added it on just to get a rough multiplier. And it tells me at a 6 times DTI, we could borrow up to 2.136. We're only at 1.4, so we have a lot more borrowing in us and left to think about. So what would I do personally? If we're located on the Gold Coast and in the Sydney market, I think you're due for a really good couple of runs there. And in a 15-year time frame, I personally wouldn't be selling them yet. Here's what I'm thinking. This is where my mind goes. So first and foremost, I did the calculations and I said, okay, if we went out and we bought a new investment property and we sold it down, we bought a new investment property for 600K and we used the equity out of our PPOR and we held it for 15 years, it went up to 1.5 million, assuming it doubling every 10 years, it went up to 1.5 million. Now, if we sold that, we'd come out of there with 635K, right? If we bought one in the next year, left it 15 years, and then sold it. Now, the issue with that is, okay, 635, I'd sell that and then I could pay off the PPR debt. But then I'd still have these two loans, which means I need to buy another one and then sell it off. And then I'd only be left with one, which is not great, which is not ideal. And I'm not too sure that if we can get there with where we're at the moment. So I said, is it possible that we buy 2 IPs, which I think you can with your sort of DTI levels, talk to your broker, talk to your accountant. But what I would do is I would probably look to sell these in those times. Again, aging units, aging townhouses, part of strata complexes, no value add, no other levers. But I went down here and I calculated. Now, Lisa didn't tell me what she bought these for, but I made some assumptions on the cost base, right? IP1, 480K cost base, meaning in 15 years' time, when it's worth 2 million, I'd make a 1.52 mil gain, I'd pay 342 tax, and I'd come out of it with $1.178 million if I sold IP1 in 15 years' time. That's a lot better and is double IP3. So it means you can pay off, obviously, 2 times the amount. 7 plus 3, you'd be able to pay off 7 and 450. You'd potentially be able to pay off that. But I said, if you sold IP2, let's crunch the numbers. Again, unit, not much value uplift, and you can't add a bedroom, you can't add a granny flat, you're capped with how much rental increase you can cut, and then you have the strata and maintenance and holding costs eat away at your profit. So I said, if we sold IP1 and IP2, 1.6 mil, 600K cost base, $1 million gain, 225 tax, you'd come out of this with $1.953 million. Now, let's have a look at how much debt we've got. We've got 2 600K assets at 1.2 mil. And then we've got 700K, 713K of the PPOR. So that is $1.913 million in debt we'd have. So technically, if I sold off these two, I'd be in a better spot because I'd have 2 left over. These could be better assets. These, if I'm strategic when I purchase them, potentially, and go back and watch my other videos, but there's things like a 3 to 4 bed arbitrage that we could do. You don't have to do that now, but if you're buying in those areas and you're buying those 3 bedrooms where we know the 4 bedroom demand is there, we could convert them along down the track to increase yield. We can add a bedroom, or can even add the granny flat. Now watch how we do it. 1.913, we had 1.953. So it tells me we could sell these two, pay off 1, 2, 3, no debt in the portfolio in 15 years' time. Now, what is that going to bring in terms of rent? Well, these properties now are renting at about $30,000 a year, 4% annual increases, same that I applied to here, over 15 years time, meaning they're going to bring in about $55,000 a rent. Now the benefit is the holding costs are going to be smaller because these could be a newer asset, they're a house, they don't have all the strata and body corp complexities. Minus 10 grand of expenses, meaning 45 grand a year, 45K per year. 45K per year times it by 2 is 90 grand. Now, obviously you look at this here and you go, oh, I had 110. Yeah, but if it's 10 to 50, if it's going to cost you 15K per dwelling, that's we're going to minus 30K of holding costs from that, which means you're only at $80,000 and there's no opportunities of value add. So I believe in terms of rental income, you'll also be in a better position. One thing that I haven't even talking about or spoken about, that is if you operate as you are now. Now, if I get my calculator, give me a sec. Now, if we are able to, and I've just said both of you are on 150K, that becomes 220K after tax, right? If we can put away 18% of this into a savings fund, 18% of your post-tax contribution, aware that you've got a portfolio that's negatively geared, but if you're able to put that or somewhere close to it, that would be 40K per year. Now you can put that in the offset against the PPR, you can put it wherever you want. That might actually be a good idea because again, decrease this cost here, but 40K a year, right? This is what I'm thinking. 40K a year, if you can do that for 15 years, that's 600 grand. In 15 years time, that means what I could do, split that in half and add a granny flat to each of these properties. 1, 2. Again, at that point in time, the granny flats are probably bringing in about 30 grand a year in rent. The cost is offset by the depreciation, which means that's 30 grand net after costs, which would add on an extra 60 grand per year to your passive income goal, meaning that is 150 grand in 15 years time with 2 assets, 2 properties that have granny flats. We aren't able to get that here. If we retained these and we still bought the 2, by the time we sold them out, we'd only have 1.2, so we couldn't pay down the entire portfolio, nor could we add the granny flat. So that's my thinking about doing it that way. Something to consider and have a think about with your team. So that's 150 grand. So you're matching your partner as well. Now, the self-managed super fund, I have some reservations and questions about this. Why? Because you guys are on 300 grand, and if you're putting in 12%, you're putting in 36K per year. Now, you weren't always on that, but over 10, 20, 30-year careers that you guys have had, I would think there is more money in there than just this purchase amount. So what I looked at this and I said, okay, in 10 years worth of contributions would be 360K at 36 grand per year, times it by 10. If you both contributed, again, I don't know if it's all your money, Lisa, or with your partner or not, but a couple of questions around it. This property that you've just bought here in 15 years time increases to, is it 1 mil? Yeah, this property increases, I'm actually going to change this, right, to 1.1 mil in 15 years time. Your cost base is 530, which means you make a profit of 570K. Now, you need to talk to your financial advisor and your accountant about when you would sell this property so that you don't trigger and have to pay tax within your self-managed super fund. But if you can come out of there, right, with 570K plus $360,000 of contributions, you would have $930,000. I'm going to make the assumption that there's probably a little bit left in your self-managed super fund just because of how long you guys have been working and the costs required to get into only one property. So I'm going to say you have a self-managed super fund balance then of $1 million. You have a couple of options here. If you go out and buy a commercial asset outright, no debt, that's going to bring in 65K per year passive income. The benefit of that too is that you have the 4% annual increases, which means you add 2.6K in the first year, and then it will increase and increase and increase steadily after that. Not too bad. And obviously we've got the passive income with the rest of the property, so that when you turn 60, just think of that as another boost. But one thing you can also do as well, if you've got $1 million, if you went out and purchased, say, a $1.8 million property, 1.8 million. Now, the reason that I didn't double it and go 2 is because there's going to be some purchasing costs, stamp duty and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to say you went and you bought a $1.8 million property. No, I'm going to say 1.7. I'm going to say you had a $1.7 million property that you went out and bought. You moved $1 million in cash, which means I'm going to say you had a debt of 800K. At 6% interest rate is going to cost you 48 grand, right? 800K loan, the rest of it we're using this for. Now, a $1.7 million commercial property, and if that is renting at 6.5%, a $1.7 million commercial property, if that's renting at 6.5%, is going to be bringing in 110K. 110K minus my 48,000. Is going to bring in 62K. So very similar in terms of 65 outright or the 62. The benefit that you have is obviously when you have 110K coming in, and you get your 4% annual increases, it's an additional 4.4K in the first year, and it compounds after that compared to 2K. So you're going to end up increasing and getting more money more quickly if you have a bigger asset. That's something to think about in your self-managed super fund. Out of self-managed, me personally, I wouldn't be keeping assets that have no value add or trigger pull. And again, when I sell assets, I want to sell the assets that I've held for the longest amount of time. The reason is because I have the most then capital growth or capital gain to play with to then pay off the rest of my portfolio. Didn't really work numbers-wise if I'm just selling these, because if I sold these, I have more debt. I'd be still negative 200-300 grand in debt, which is not great. And then you use the money that you've saved up. If you've used the money that you saved up to pay off the debt, you wouldn't have the ability to put the granny flats on because you don't have that there. Whereas if we flip it and we do it the other way, we go out and just make 2 purchases. We make them with a conscious decision that we're going to add granny flats in the next 10 to 15 years. So the block size, the zoning, the location. Tick. Maybe we also overlay another valuable layer in terms of a 3 to 4 bed conversion in there with the property data. Plenty of guys in our course that are doing something like that or similar. That way I can get my hands on potentially a better asset. Might even be concrete slab and brick. That I know I can do conversion to increase the rent even more, and then I can have the granny flat on. And these guys have had their run. Gold Coast, good location. You know what we've got coming up on the Gold Coast to be able to increase property prices. Same with the Sydney undervalued unit market. So a lot more money to play with down here. That's the way I would do it. Something to think about, Lisa. Again, guys, any value or feedback, let me know. But if you can help me get to my goal of 2.5 by the end of the year, would really appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow.